You know, I probably shouldn't be at this point, but I'm still kind of amazed at all the ways in which God takes the things that our enemy, the devil, intends for evil and uses them for good and His glory. Hi, I'm Terry, pastor of Single Adult Ministries and Life Groups here at North Coast, and I'm hoping that by my sharing a little about my experience with anger, you'll come to an understanding that if you also struggle in this area or know someone who does, you're not alone. It can get better and be overcome. You see, when I say I've struggled with anger, I mean I would go into tirades and over the silliest and stupidest of things. It was like I would become possessed in some way, kind of like that old Looney Tunes character, the Tasmanian Devil. You know who I'm talking about? But have you experienced how sometimes God uses super significant events in our lives, almost as if to really get our attention and bring us to a place where we can experience real change and healing? That's largely the way I would describe how it happened with me. You see, the woman I originally pledged my forever love to, created and raised 2 kids with, had let me know she was leaving our marriage. I knew deep within my heart that, at least in part, it had to have something to do with my anger. So, at some point during our 3-year process of separation and my trying to reconcile the relationship, I apologized. I took responsibility and said I was so sorry for all the times I let myself get out of control. I acknowledged that I needed and would seek Christian counseling. But somewhere in the midst of my apology, she dismissed it. She said something to the effect of, "Oh, you don't need to apologize, and I don't want you to have to carry that around. It's just part of your personality and who you are, and you can't change that." You know, I got to tell you, that really stirred something up inside of me. So I began to read and listen to every bit of Christian guidance I could find on the subject. I dug more diligently than ever into reading my Bible, meditating on its words. I read and bringing it to God in prayer. I read before the passage Ephesians 4:26, but it began to really take on more significance in light of the circumstances I found myself in. It says, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold." Man, I couldn't even imagine how many times I'd let the sun go down with my still being angry, or how many times I'd just given the devil not just a foothold, but how I allowed him to run roughshod over so many aspects and people in my life. I knew I really wanted to change in order to become the disciple I felt I was called to be, and to more positively impact all of the other relationships in my life. As I got some counseling and continued to study, I learned what I think are a few important things. First, anger is most often our body's way of telling us that something doesn't seem right in our world. There is such a thing as righteous anger, but most of the time, this was not what I was exhibiting. Anger often stems from one of 2 areas, fear or hurt. I began to learn how and try to break down what I was feeling in the 2 areas in the midst of my anger. Did you know that more than 50% of the people who seek Christian counseling are dealing with some form of anger in their lives, either their own or that of another? Second, I realized that I can learn to respond instead of react, that I don't need to reflex off of every feeling of things not being right that comes into my mind. When I submit to and turn my anger over to Jesus through study of His Word, meditation on His Word, prayer and submission to His will over mine, things just plain go better. You know, there's a worship song that's out right now that I think really speaks to the way I'm continuing to learn. It says this: "From doubts to a hope, holding on and letting go of all the empty promises of shame. This is my song. I was one way, but now I'm different. There was a clear change in, a holy collision, who I was and who I'll forever be, and He was the in-between." Jesus is definitely changing me from the inside out as I learn to become more self-disciplined. And perhaps the greatest testimony I can give to His grace and mercy is when someone who I now interact with and tell about my anger responds with, "You? Well, I can't believe you were ever an angry person." I was one way, but now I'm different, and Jesus is the in-between. That's my story. What's yours?